She woke up before sunrise, with swollen feet and a tired soul, but never failed to smile at her grandson. She moved unnoticed through luxurious hallways, almost like she was part of the furniture. They called her Miss, Ma'am, or simply ignored her, never by her name. But what no one saw coming was that this humble cleaning lady, with calloused hands and quiet steps, carried a strength inside her that money couldn't measure. One simple gesture, one unexpected choice, and one handwritten note were enough to break the ego of a millionaire who only believed in numbers. What she did, without even knowing, became headline news. But what he did afterward brought the whole country to a halt. Subscribe now, because this story is going to move you from beginning to end. It was always in the darkness of dawn that Loretta Mayfield stepped outside her front door. The clock read 4:48 a.m. when she gently closed it behind her, careful not to wake her 8-year-old grandson, who still slept like an angel under thin covers and quiet dreams. Loretta didn't wear a watch. Her time was kept by routine. Bus stop, black coffee, 2 long rides to the Montrose mansion, and silence. It was in that silence she carried her pain. No one there knew she had buried her husband with her own hands, or that she had been raising her grandson alone ever since her daughter, addicted and lost, vanished on a corner in Detroit. No one knew, and deep down no one asked. Her uniform was always the same: loose pants, a worn blouse, and old sneakers. But what truly stood out were her hands, cracked, as if every wrinkle told a story of effort. And they did. That woman, whom many saw as just another maid, held more dignity in her eyes than most of the suited guests who passed through that mansion. Loretta cleaned with precision, folded sheets like works of art, and set the table with a perfectionism that bordered on poetic. But no one applauded her. At best, she got a side eye if she missed a speck of dust on a picture frame. She didn't talk much, and maybe that's what bothered people. Her boss, sweet and gracious in front of the cameras, once whispered, "She's good, but feels like she's hiding something." The comment hung in the air like dust that hadn't been wiped. Without realizing it, Loretta became the target of suspicion just for being discreet. The world doesn't forgive the quiet ones, especially if they're poor, especially if they're black, especially if they're women. And Loretta was all three, carrying a strength that didn't ask for attention. She just did what needed to be done. Taking care of Trevor, her grandson, was the reason she kept going. He had his father's eyes, a man he never met, and her daughter's smile, back when it was still clean. Loretta never told him that sometimes she ate less so there'd be more left for him. She'd say her stomach was tight, like it was a choice. Sometimes she came home with swollen feet, but still played castle with cardboard boxes. Because even a child surrounded by pain deserves to believe the world is good, even if it's a lie for now. At the Montrose mansion, the furniture cost more than her entire car, and she knew it. She knew the risk of bumping into an imported vase and owing 6 months' rent. She knew that every gesture she made could be seen as inappropriate, overstepping, or just wrong. That's why Loretta avoided eye contact. She kept her head down, cleaned as if asking permission, moved as if constantly on the edge of being humiliated, as if she knew that, at any moment, someone might shout, "You don't belong here." Still, she was never late, not even when it rained, not even when the bus broke down, not even that day at the station when a woman collapsed and everyone just stepped over her, everyone except Loretta. She always arrived before everyone else, arranged the flowers, changed the water, checked the family's calendar, and made sure everything was in place. It was a level of excellence no one asked for, but she gave it anyway, because that's what she knew how to do. And deep down, it was her way of shouting, "I exist." Even so, her presence was treated like a household item. Functional, replaceable. Some guests didn't even know her name. One of them once asked for coffee with a careless, "Hey, you there?" She served it with a faint smile, because getting upset had a cost, and Loretta couldn't afford that. Not with a grandson to raise, not with overdue bills, not with rent piling up, even while juggling 3 jobs. Yes, 3. The mansion was just one. At night, she cleaned office buildings. On weekends, she helped a neighbor take care of the elderly. And even then, it never seemed to be enough. There was a quiet kind of pain Loretta never told anyone about. Sometimes she cried while washing the dishes. Not out of sadness, but from feeling forgotten. Invisible, like the world moved right past her without noticing. As if her whole existence had been built on effort no one ever acknowledged. She remembered her younger days, when she dreamed of being a music teacher. But life had other plans. That dream was swallowed by reality and turned into survival. But never into bitterness. Loretta wasn't bitter. She was strong. She just didn't know how strong yet. Despite it all, there was grace in everything she did. Every folded towel was an act of care. Every neatly made bed, a quiet show of respect. She didn't do it out of duty. She did it because she believed that whatever you do with love comes back to you. Even if it takes time. Even if no one sees it. Even if the world judges you without ever knowing your story. And it was that love, quiet, invisible, but whole, that caught the attention of someone who'd never admit he was watching. What Loretta didn't know, and probably would never guess, was that behind the cold walls of that mansion, someone was watching her, judging her in silence. Silas Montrose, the millionaire she barely saw, didn't see her as a worker, but as a threat. And it wasn't her fault. It was his past. A recent one, raw and bleeding. A betrayal that still throbbed like an open wound. And in the depths of his bruised pride, a cruel idea began to take shape. Put that humble maid face to face with temptation. Because in his mind, everyone had a price. And she was about to be tested like never before. He hadn't always been that way. Hard to believe, but Silas Montrose, this cold, calculating man in a tailored suit and unreadable eyes, once had a peaceful heart. He started his company at 27, with the help of the woman he loved, Julianne, and the support of the family's driver, Benson, whom he treated like a brother. For a while, it looked like a modern-day success story. The three of them grew together, laughed together, traveled the world together. But then, one day, everything fell apart. Literally. He came home early from a trip and found the bedroom ransacked, accounts emptied, and a note on the pillow. 3 lines. No tears. You trusted too much. We were smarter. From that day on, something inside him died. Silas didn't just lose money. He lost the comfort of trust. Julianne, his wife of 8 years, and Benson, his right-hand man, had run off together. They took money, secrets, and the last bit of innocence he had left. Silas tried to pull himself back together. Hired lawyers, filed police reports, froze cards, closed accounts, but none of it came back. The loss wasn't just financial. It was emotional, and the shame unforgettable. What the newspapers called a luxury love scam, Silas called the day everything turned into a lie. From that moment on, Silas turned to stone. In his eyes, his words, his relationships. He started living surrounded by contracts, fine print, surveillance, and cameras. He built a system of mistrust for everything and everyone, even his own employees. It's not paranoia, it's prevention, he'd say. And with that mindset, he made his next mistake. A few months after the scandal, he accused a nanny named Cynthia of stealing a family emerald necklace. He called the police. Security searched her purse. They found nothing. Days later, the necklace turned up in Julianne's closet, hidden there before she ran. But the damage had already been done. The image of that woman, handcuffed and crying in front of her 6-year-old son, never left Silas's mind. Not because he felt guilty, but because he hated feeling vulnerable again. To him, every employee was a risk. Every kind gesture could be a disguise. Trust had become a luxury he refused to give. He didn't smile anymore. And when he did, it was calculated. The man he had become was cold, efficient, and strategic. The kind who wore custom suits and collected wins like trophies. But he slept poorly, always poorly. While the world admired him as a visionary businessman, Silas drowned himself in spreadsheets and deals to avoid feeling anything. At home, he moved with calculated steps, inspecting everything. Security cameras were his obsession. He had micro cameras installed in corners no one would suspect. Audio, motion sensors, remote alerts. He turned every inch of the house into a fortress, not against burglars, but against being betrayed again. He refused to be surprised, or fooled, or hurt. Not ever again. And that's exactly why, when he noticed Loretta's extreme punctuality, her quiet ways, her disciplined routine, something in him lit up. Not admiration, not empathy, suspicion. No one's that perfect without hiding something, he muttered to himself, eyes locked on the office camera feed. He started paying closer attention to her, knew every hallway she walked through, timed how long she stayed in the guest room. He even noticed that she folded the napkins into little flowers, though no one ever asked her to. And that bothered him more than he cared to admit. For days, Silas stayed silent, analyzing her every move like she was a potential threat. And the more dignity he saw in Loretta, the more he doubted her. He'd seen this movie before. People pretending to be someone they weren't. Politeness masking hidden agendas. And Silas Montrose wasn't going to be fooled again. So, he decided to run another one of his tests. A method he'd used before with other employees. A quiet plan, cold and calculated down to the second. To him, it was nothing personal, just another way to separate the worthy from the opportunists. That morning, Silas came down for breakfast like always. But there was something different in his eyes. A strange gleam. The office safe was wide open. A mistake? No, a setup. Inside were piles of cash, important documents, and a gold chain left out in plain sight. A perfect bait. He'd unlocked the safe himself, left the door cracked, and waited. Turned on the hidden camera, then sat down in the library to watch, like a director waiting for his play to begin. The stage was set, and the lead actress was Loretta Mayfield. She had no idea. She was just doing her job. Walked in with a microfiber cloth and a bottle of vinegar spray. And there it was, the safe. Wide open, showing off everything she had never owned. Silas held his breath. His eyes were locked on the screen. This was it. The moment. The test. The final proof. And what he was about to see wasn't just an answer. It would be a direct hit to everything he thought he knew about the world. Silas watched the scene, frozen. The quiet housekeeper stood there, right in front of the open safe, like a character about to decide the outcome of a story she didn't even know she was part of. Everything had been carefully staged, cold, predictable. But what this woman, unknowingly under scrutiny, was about to do wasn't in Silas's script. And it definitely wasn't in the math of his ego. Because in that space, between the silence of wealth and the weight of a past full of betrayal, one small action would flip everything upside down. And what she did next shattered him. That morning, everything seemed normal. The sun peeked through the curtains, and Loretta arrived like always. Early, punctual, walking with the cautious steps of someone who knows the limits of space that doesn't belong to her. But behind the walls, yes, there were cameras. Someone was waiting. Silas Montrose sat in the library, his coffee untouched, eyes locked on the office monitor. The safe had been left wide open on purpose. Piles of cash, gold chains, sensitive documents. A trap, carefully arranged by someone still bleeding from a betrayal he couldn't let go of. Loretta walked into the room like she always did, wearing cleaning gloves, a microfiber cloth tucked in her pocket. First, she opened the window to let in fresh air. Then, she moved toward the desk. And that's when she saw it. The safe slightly open, showing off bills stacked so perfectly they seemed to beg for attention. She frowned. Her eyes narrowed. A quiet doubt flickered in her face. But there was no hesitation. Just a sigh, and a step back. She looked around, as if trying to make sense of it. Did someone forget to close it? Was it a mistake? Or a setup? She didn't know. But she knew one thing for sure. That wasn't hers. And it wasn't her place. Loretta walked slowly to the safe, gently closed the door, turned the lock, then searched for paper, found a notepad. She stood up straight, wrote with firm strokes, like someone who knows exactly what they're doing. Mr. Montrose, I found the safe open. Take care of what's yours. A person's greatest wealth is their conscience. She left the note clearly visible right on the desk. In the library, Silas stayed silent. Every move that woman made hit him like an invisible punch. It didn't make sense. She didn't touch the money, didn't peek, didn't rush, not even a second of doubt. And she left a note? Who does that? What kind of person walks away from a chance to change their life, especially when no one's watching? Silas felt his chest tighten. It wasn't just surprising. It was disarming. That moment unraveled him from the inside out. But even in the face of such a flawless act, Silas resisted. It was as if something inside him refused to accept it. He had built too many walls around his heart. He was certain everyone had a selfish side, especially poor people. Everyone lies, he repeated to himself, like a mantra. But seeing that woman, the one so many dismissed without ever knowing her story, return what wasn't hers with grace and dignity, made Silas feel small, and he hated feeling that way. Still, Silas kept the video saved. He didn't mention it to anyone. Spent the day in silence, watching that same moment over and over. With each replay, something new hit him. The care with which Loretta closed the safe. The natural way she moved. The complete absence of greed. No rush. No guilt. Just a quiet certainty. She wouldn't fall into the trap because she had nothing to hide. And for a man who didn't even trust his own reflection, that wasn't just surprising. It was humiliating. At the end of the day, Loretta headed to the bus stop. She had no idea the earthquake she had caused without saying a single word. And the next morning, everything went on as usual. She arranged the flowers in the living room, changed the guest linens, and cleaned the office like always. But this time, something had changed. Silas watched her differently. Less like a boss. More like a man being confronted by a lesson he never expected to receive and from someone he had never even respected. Meanwhile, Loretta went on with her routine. She had no idea of the secret hidden behind the walls of that house. The video of her quiet gesture had already been played more than 20 times by Silas. But it still wasn't public. It remained a private shock, trapped in the hands of a man who thought he was above everything, until he was taught by someone who came from the bottom. And that's the irony. Sometimes millionaires learn more from the ones who clean their carpets than from the ones who close million-dollar deals at their side. Little by little, her gesture began to disturb other wounds inside him. Wounds he had buried under layers of luxury, meetings, and empty speeches. But now they were bleeding again, because it wasn't just about the safe. It was about trust. And Silas didn't even trust himself. The problem wasn't Loretta. It was the mirror she had become. A mirror that reminded him that once, long ago, he too was someone who believed in others. Before he lost everything. Before the betrayal. Before he became the kind of man who set traps because he no longer knew how to deal with the truth. Silas watched that recording for the 30th time that night. The video didn't show a scandal, or shouting, or theft. But even so, it tore him apart. Just a housekeeper closing a safe and leaving a note. Simple, quiet, but it shattered him. Because, without even realizing it, she had done what no one else ever could. Exposed the wound he tried hardest to hide. And then, out of nowhere, Silas made a decision. He stood up, grabbed his phone, and with one tap, shared the video with the world. But that's not what shocked everyone. What truly shook the country was what he wrote in the caption. The next morning, the world woke up different for Loretta Mayfield, though she had no idea. While she made her grandson's breakfast and counted coins to pay for gas, her name was blowing up across social media. The video, posted by Silas Montrose on his personal account, had already racked up thousands of views in just a few hours. But it wasn't just the footage that caught attention. It was the caption. In sharp, simple words, he wrote, "Trust can't be bought. It has to be earned. And I was just taught that by the most invisible person in my house." That was all it took. The video went viral. News sites, talk shows, radio stations, and journalists all wanted to know, who was that woman? The reaction was instant. Comments flooded Silas's post. Some doubted it. Others cried. People wrote things like, "She reminds me of my mom." Others asked if she had a lawyer, if she needed help, if someone should start a fundraiser. The world wanted to know the woman who, standing in front of an open safe, chose to close it and leave a note. And meanwhile, Loretta was washing dishes. She had no idea that her name was now being searched more than any celebrity in the country. All she cared about was whether she'd catch the second bus on time. It was her grandson, Trevor, who found out first. A little girl at school showed him the video on her phone. "Is this your grandma?" she asked. And there she was, on screen, cleaning the office, folding the note, walking away. The caption scrolling, the comments exploding. Trevor ran home. "Grandma, you're famous," he shouted, eyes glowing. Loretta frowned, dried her hands, and sat down. When she saw the video, she froze. Her hands trembled. "My God, what is this?" she whispered. It felt like someone had ripped off the invisible cloak she'd been wearing for years. Silas, on the other hand, didn't give interviews, didn't go to the press, didn't try to justify himself. For him, this wasn't marketing. It was atonement. For the nanny he falsely accused. For the wife who ran away with everything. For the way he treated every employee like a suspect. For the first time in years, he stayed quiet. Let the world see, unfiltered, who truly had value in that house. And the most surprising part? It wasn't him. Invitations began arriving at Loretta's house. Talk shows wanted her story. Universities offered scholarships to Trevor. Brands wanted to sponsor her. Companies sent gift baskets, flowers, handwritten cards. But she didn't understand it. "I just closed the safe," she kept saying. But people saw more. They saw character. They saw honesty in a country tired of scandals and lies. They saw hope. And in a time where so many scream for attention, her silence spoke louder than any politician's speech. Still, she turned down most offers. She only accepted one, a short interview on a local radio station because the host had grown up in the same neighborhood. And there, with a trembling voice, Loretta said, "I didn't do it for praise. I did it for me. Because when you know who you are, you don't need to take anything from anyone to prove your worth." The host cried, and the whole country did too. Never had a cleaning lady taught so much with so few words. The media began calling her the woman with the note. But Trevor said she was much more than that. "My grandma's magic," he'd say, smiling. And maybe she was. Because in just a few days, Loretta changed the way people looked at each other, changed the way people spoke, rewrote the role of someone who'd always been overlooked. Neighbors clapped when she walked by. The bus driver greeted her loudly with a smile. And most importantly, she was finally called by her name, something that almost never happened before. Still unsure how to respond to it all, Silas began walking through the house in silence. The staff now looked at him differently, not with fear, but with the kind of respect that only comes when someone has the courage to admit they were wrong. He had been arrogant, yes. Harsh, yes. But also human. And Loretta's gesture held up an uncomfortable mirror to him. Because more than her humility, what shook him the most was realizing that he, with all he had, would have never done the same. And it was in that moment of reflection that Silas did something even greater. Something that didn't involve posts, cameras, or likes. A silent gesture, but a powerful one. Because if Loretta had given him the greatest lesson of his life, he needed to respond accordingly. And what he did after that revelation wasn't something anyone saw coming. It was his chance to finally rewrite not just his own story, but the stories of many others who had always been treated as invisible. Silas said nothing, made no public announcements, no emotional speeches. He simply took a portion of his fortune, the same fortune once used to fuel his suspicion, and created a quiet, yet powerful, fund. A fund for single mothers, housekeepers, cooks, gardeners, drivers, everyone like Loretta, who kept the world running while being ignored. And the name of the fund? Note of Conscience. No statues, no headlines, but everyone understood. The arrogant millionaire who once trusted no one had finally learned that not all wealth fits inside a safe. Loretta heard about the fund from others. She never got an official invitation, but that didn't bother her. She wasn't looking for medals. She was looking for peace. And at last, she found it. A few months later, she received another offer, this time from a hotel chain known for valuing ethics and transparency. They wanted her to lead as an internal integrity coordinator, mentoring new teams about conduct, trust, and dignity. Loretta thought it over, reflected, and said yes. But with one condition: she would stay in her neighborhood. Stay true to who she had always been. At 54, Loretta no longer rode 3 buses a day, but she still woke up early, took Trevor to school, helped her neighbors, attended community meetings. When people asked how she was doing, she smiled and said, "Peaceful, with a clear conscience." And those who knew her story knew how much weight those words carried. She hadn't just closed a safe. She had opened minds, unlocked hearts, and taught a lesson no degree or title could ever explain. Trevor, meanwhile, had become even more curious, more outspoken, more hopeful. He now told his friends he wanted to be a lawyer, to defend people no one listens to. And when they asked why, he said, "Because that's what they did to my grandma." And even then, she won. An 8-year-old boy understanding the value of character, without realizing how many adults still stumble over that same lesson. All because one day, a humble woman refused to take what wasn't hers and left something far greater in its place. Silas still saw her from time to time, on the front page of a paper, in the corner of a magazine. He never approached, never tried to rewrite the past. But now, he looked at her with respect, and in a quiet, private ritual, every time he stepped into the office and saw the safe, he remembered the note. The yellowed piece of paper was still there, framed discreetly. The greatest lesson he had ever received, handwritten by a woman whose humility could never be bought. Today, in the house where it all began, the carpets are still cleaned, the windows still shine, but something in the air has changed. Loretta's name is no longer whispered with suspicion. It's spoken with pride. And even as time goes on, as social media forgets, as the algorithm shifts, those who live that story will never be the same. Because deep down, everyone learned. Not every lesson comes from the top. Sometimes, it comes from those we barely notice, until it's too late to pretend we didn't see. And just like that, the woman who once walked silently through the halls of a mansion became a symbol of something money can never buy: honesty without an audience. Her secret wasn't grand. It was simple, but powerful, and life-changing. And that was exactly what changed the life of a millionaire. Forever. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without showing it. Like this video to support the channel. Subscribe now, so you don't miss stories like this. And drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Because around here, no one is invisible.